Ahoy there folks, I'm Captain Benzie and welcome to another developer Q&A video for EVE Echoes. Each week the developers take 4 questions posed by you, the community, they answer those questions and then post the responses to the official EVE Echoes Facebook page, Twitter account, and somewhere deep in the depths of the game you can go in via your ship AI and there's a way to check the dev Q&A there as well. Now each week I like to go over the 4 questions and the 4 answers, adding my own opinions and thoughts there, giving additional information from previous developer Q&As, Reddit AMAs, things like that as well that we've had in the past, to give a general idea of what could be coming at some point in the future and how this might impact the game. Of course, this is just my own personal thoughts and opinions. I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments section down below, remembering that every week I give 3 people a month of combo Omega each. One of them is chosen at random from my YouTube comments for that week, 2 of them are taken from the public section of my Discord, so make sure you are joining the conversation to be in with the chance of winning a month of combo Omega. Beyond that as well, if you have a question that you would like the developers to answer, there is a link in the description of this very video that will take you to a Google document. In that document you can then add your question, send it off to the developers, and if your question is one of the ones chosen to be responded to, not only do you get an answer to the question, not only do you get your question featured in one of my awesome videos, you also win a month of basic Omega, which is pretty sweet, I think. Anyway, with all that said and done then, let's jump straight into this week's developer Q&A, which is for the week of the 1st to 7th of June. We are halfway through this year already, goodness gracious me. I'm getting old, time's flying that fast. Right, anyway, let's have a look. Question 1. Do you plan on adding a fuel tank for the Rorqual and or Orca? Because both ships have boosters for the mining that eat a lot of energy, and Rorqual can compress raw ore and use jump like other capital ships. Thank you for your suggestion, says Cloud. We will add the fuel tank for these 2 ships soon. And I get that. Because when you're mining, you do want to have as much space as possible for the actual ores, etc. That said, you've got an absolutely monstrous ore tank, and you've still got the standard, the ore hold, and you've still got the standard hold there as well. Like, how much ore do you really need? I don't know. I don't think the Rorqual and the Orca actually needed a fuel tank, because I think the standard tank is fine for that. The standard, the standard hold. Because it's a pretty sizable hold, you've got an absolutely monstrous ore hold to begin with. Do you really need a 3rd hold just for the fuel, so that the fuel doesn't eat into your, into how much you can carry? I think the whole point is that you would work out how much ore you actually, how much fuel you actually need to compress and keep things going, but honestly, if you're filling up the Rorqual's ore hold and the standard hold as well, and you've got too much fuel left, that just means you didn't calculate it properly. And I honestly don't think that you actually need a fuel tank here. But hey, quality of life. Shut up, Benzie. You're clearly wrong on this one. They are adding a fuel tank for the Rorqual and Orca at some point in the future. I'm actually averse to fuel tanks overall for most things, because I think the whole point of having fuel isn't just busy work. If you give it a fuel tank, then it's just busy work to make sure that your fuel tank is topped up every time you leave. It doesn't add any meaningful gameplay. In fact, having the fuel tank takes away from meaningful gameplay. Meaningful gameplay is looking at your standard hold and saying, right, I need to make sure I've got enough ore to last the time I'm going to be undocked, but I don't want to carry too much that it impacts my mining operation. That's meaningful. Just, make sure that the fuel tank is full before you go is not meaningful. I'm actually kind of against that, but hey, it's a quality of life change. I'm sure some folks are going to be happy on it. Question 2. Would it be possible to add in buildable storage containers to allow us to better organise and inventory our hangars? A way to separate grey loot, PI, minerals, etc. without having to store it in unused ships. This is a thing in EVE Online, cargo containers. They are structures that you can build yourself, industrialists can build them, you then assemble them in a station, and it gives you, like you have your ship hangar and your item hangar, you then get a subdivision for your item hangar. Like, when you go on the market and you tap on high slots and it subdivides it into lasers and cannons and things like that. It's like that, but in the standard inventory. When you're docked at the station, you can actually subdivide and you can rename these. I've actually just added a couple to my character on EVE Online now that I've got a home station of Thera properly set up. So I use those to subdivide, like have my filaments and all in one container, and then I can subdivide like different bits of gear into other containers. They're fairly costly, but they just allow organisation. Like, you can survive without them, but it's nice to have them just to help sort of organise things and keep on top of all your inventory. Now, Lance.Dot says that adding cargo containers is currently in our development plan. Not that you'd know, because there's been no update to the Trello for goodness knows how long, but the release time is to be determined. Cool, so we're getting cargo containers, alongside, hopefully, they have mentioned at some point in the future that they want to add the ability to name your ships. I'm all for this. That's something that really needs to happen, because I've got so many of the same hull that are fitted differently that I want to swap around, and it sucks having to tap on them, check their contents, figure out which fit is which, and then jump into it, to the point that I tend to add like a small item to the cargo hold and just remember that, oh, the one that's got this in the cargo hold is that ship. Being able to name them would be really useful. Cargo containers as well, really useful addition, excellent quality of life change. Please Netties, make sure that we can rename them. They're pretty naff without it. Usable, but much better if you can name them. Are mining drones supposed to be able to work with battleships? If so, I think there's a bug, as they do not yield any ore at this time when fitted to, for example, an Armageddon. I know such a ship is not intended for mining, but I was under the impression that mining drones would work on all ships with large drone tubes. Cloud responds, mining drones are normal large drones. All ships with large drone launch tubes can be equipped with mining drones, such as battleships. Which, yes, that's what the person asking this question is saying, Cloud. They can, and yes, you can launch them and you can use them, they just don't actually give any ore. If you are using mining drones on a ship that has an ore hold, it puts them into the ore hold. And I haven't actually checked this, but what happens if you launch mining drones with a full ore hold? Do they actually still harvest into the standard hold? Because that is my theory on the bug that's going on here, that mining drones go into the ore hold and only into the ore hold. They don't seem to actually store into a standard container, which is the issue, obviously, when you're in a standard ship like an Armageddon. Now, again, this is fairly niche. I get it, that it's one of those things that, like, how many people are actually going to be out there in a Dominix or an Armageddon or whatever, mining with large mining drones? But at the same token, it does kind of make sense if you think about it, because if you want to have a battleship that's sitting... Oh, sorry, that messed with the screen. If you want to have a battleship sitting in a mining belt and, you know, keeping protection running in case an enemy fleet comes along, then being able to actually launch drones and do a little bit of mining yourself, that's kind of cool. I get why people would want this. It's niche, but ultimately it is clearly a bug, and it's a bug that should be fixed, and I think that's the clear point here. If someone could just check, actually, what happens if your mining drones, what happens if your ore hold is completely full and you send out mining drones? Do they actually fill up the standard hold? Because that's my theory here, is that the coding doesn't look for overflow, it just looks for an ore hold. Anyway, fourth and final question then, bit of a short dev Q&A this week, admittedly. I don't think you should be able to park a character in a system cloaked 24/7 for days on end. What are the thoughts on making cloaking devices use fuel? Cloud says, thanks for your suggestion, we'll add ways to counter long-term cloak in the near future. Fuel is the wrong way about this, and I know I've done videos where in the past I've mentioned that, well, maybe you could put fuel in a tank for the cloaks. I think there's a prevalence to consider fuel to be like the solution to everything. Now, I wouldn't mind this if fuel was a bit more EVE Online centric, where in EVE Online you have different fuels for different things. In EVE Echoes, we've just got different fuels that have different, a variety of gigajoules per cubic meter. So some of them, like plasmoids, give more gigajoules per cubic meter of storage space, whereas others, like heavy water, for example, take up a lot more storage space to have the same amount, but they're a little bit, you know, looser and cheaper to produce that kind of thing. You have that sort of quality scale. In EVE Online, you have different fuels that do different things, like you need a particular fuel to power a station, you need a different fuel to power a jump drive, different fuels for sinusoidal field generators, that kind of thing there. And I wouldn't mind fuel being the answer to so many problems if different fuels were actually needed, because right now, basically, plasmoids are just flat out the best for pretty much everything. So having different fuels work for different things, then I'd be all for this. That said, in EVE Online, there is a complete different way of using cloaks. Cloaks have sort of a stability to them, 15 minutes of stability. When you activate a cloak, you have 15 minutes where that cloak is at perfect stability and you cannot be scanned, you obviously don't show up to anything, obviously you decloak when you hit a certain range from other objects, etc. But for the most part, the cloak works exactly like it does in EVE Echoes. After 15 minutes, however, it is now possible for you to be scanned down by someone who is, good at using combat probes. You're still difficult to scan because you're a small cloaked ship, but the stability is enough that basically pilots can find you. People can figure out where your ship is because the cloak isn't perfect anymore. And to me, that's a really simple, easy way of doing this, that you would have to decloak every 15 minutes and recloak. And if you added, say, I'm not going to suggest adding a cooldown on this for several minutes, because then that means that if you want to do the whole thing of jumping from system to system through multiple gate camps, suddenly a cloak doesn't do what it needs to anymore. And people like to say, oh, there should be a cooldown, or there should be something that can pulse and break cloaks. It's like, no, that's such a bad idea. Imagine you see someone appear in local, you're running a gate camp. You see someone appear in local, but their ship doesn't appear, so you use your pulse and you force them to decloak. What is the point of having a covert ops cloak then? Because that is literally designed to help you run through gate camps, and you've made a module that just hard counters it. That cannot exist. Same when it comes to, there's this concept of adding a structure that you could anchor to your citadels that would do the same thing. Pulse, and every ship that's in the system that's cloaked would drop cloak. Unless that's got a massive cooldown, it's just a hard counter. It's not fun gameplay. One of the suggestion that has been added many times is just to add that cloak's destabilization. After 15 minutes of sitting cloaked, then your cloak destabilizes and you're scannable. That means that if I'm working my way through a gate camp and I successfully make it through, I jump to the other side, I can still activate my covert ops cloak on the other side instantly if there's a gate camp on the other side too. That makes sense, right? That's using a covert ops cloak for what it's meant to, but it means you can't just stay parked in a system for 24/7, which I get. That's it. There's a lot of it. Sun Tzu in The Art of War talks a lot about how the best way to win a war is through information, reconnaissance, scanning, scouting, that kind of thing, understanding your opponent. And that's very true still in EVE, and the fact that so many of our alliances, Void included, run 24/7 cameras where you just shove someone cloaked next to a gate or off to the side and you can just watch who's coming in and out of local and stuff like that, knowing completely safely that that ship is never going to be destroyed because there is no counter to it. I don't think fuel is the right way. I think that becomes needless busy work. I think adding a destabilization system is much more important. I think if you wanted to start using things like fuel, you need to then look at other things to buff the cloak up as well. And there have been suggestions on this that maybe a covert ops cloak, when activated, should take your name out of local as well. And to be honest, I think there could be a certain thing in that. Some people have suggested it could take your name out of local but leave you as a number, so they see 5 people in local but only 4 names show up, someone's cloaked. I think you would need to take the number as well, if I'm being completely honest, and this comes from someone who lives in wormholes. Wormholes in EVE Online have no local. You don't have a number of people in local. You only show up in local when you open your mouth and talk. So if you just never speak, then the system looks as if it's completely empty, but could have hundreds of people uncloaked in it. So there's a part of me that thinks that covert ops cloaks could work that kind of way, but I get that it's a controversial topic. I think the be-all and end-all of this, though, is that fuel is not the answer unless it is a specific fuel, and then that everything else that uses fuels gets specific fuels as well. I get why in EVE Echoes they chose not to use specific fuels, but I kind of get the feeling that that would help industry as well, that if you had all these different fuels that you could sell, and people needed to buy all the different ones, then you're going to set up different mining arrays. Rather than just mining plasmoids, you're going to mine heavy water and oxygen isotopes and things like that as well, to actually sell those for people who want them. Like if you're using sinusoidal fields, you want particular fuel. If you want to fuel your station, you need another fuel. it gives variety, it adds rarity to particular fuels, and thus increases the price of them, and I think that'd be a really nice change. But let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. You know me, I'm a covert ops main, so I like to think I have a decent say when it comes to flying covert ops ships about what would and wouldn't work. But I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions as well. Perhaps you agree with me that, like, dividing fuel into different uses would be beneficial. Perhaps you massively disagree. Perhaps you think that mining drones should not be usable on battleships. They should only be on the standard mining ships. Perhaps you think that, like me, the addition of a fuel tank is too much for an Orca and a Rorqual. Why can't they just, you know, use the standard hold? I don't know. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section of this video down below. Let me know your thoughts and opinions. You could win a month of Combo Omega just for having your say. Anyway, folks, thank you for watching right the way through to the end. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!